to do another podcast. This time it's with Dr. Sarah Telfer, who is an Associate Theory Professor in the Education Department at the University of Bolton in the Faculty of Professional Studies. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. I feel like we're getting a little bit back to normal. We've been able to see each other on campus.
I know. It's nice, isn't it, seeing people in flesh? Because there's a different dynamic talking online than there is talking face to face with people, isn't it? And you miss it. You miss it.
Absolutely. I met somebody the other day who I've only ever seen on Zoom, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're a real person!" It was just amazing. So
sometimes you sort of see people out of proportion, don't you? Because you only ever see them sitting down. So I think it's quite an interesting thing, and you think, "Oh my goodness, you're really tall."
Yes. Absolutely. So thank you for agreeing to join us today, talking about your educational journey. So I guess that's where we're going to start. So how has education been for you, thinking about back when you was in high school?
Okay. When I was in high school, I went to a very strict all-girls school down in Clevedon in Somerset, where I come from, which I don't think it really worked for me, actually, when I was that age. I was quite a creative type. I always have been. I was into drama and English and acting, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I think I struggled a little bit with the compulsory subjects as at O level, as they were called then. So when I was 16, I left high school. And I went to a college of further education. I went to Weston-super-Mare Technical College. Have you heard of Weston-super-Mare?
Yeah.
On the sunny seaside, yeah. So that suited me a lot better. Shall I just close the window? Because I think my fingers are tinkling now. 1 second.
Oh, okay.
1 second. And then blowing around. So I went to Weston-super-Mare Technical College to do my A levels, which suited me a lot better. And I think that's where my love of further education started. And I did A levels in drama and English and communication studies. And I think I was a lot happier because I could choose the subjects I wanted to study. I then went on to university, funny, to Leeds University, but actually to Bretton Hall College. Have you heard of Bretton Hall College? Where the Yorkshire Sculpture Park is now. And I had a very happy 3 years of doing drama there, which again, I was concentrating on a subject that I really liked and enjoyed. After that, I went on to work as a professional actress for about 6 or 7 years.
Wow.
So I did bits of film, bits of television, lots of waitressing in between, which I think all the jobs I did in between actually enriched my understanding of work and life. And I think as an educator, all the things that make me up as an educator, Lyndsey, are all the experiences that I've had. Such as jobs, and obviously college work and degrees, but that all feeds into your concept of life. Yeah. So I worked as an actress for a while, and this is the interesting bit of my story, because then I met somebody who wanted, this is how funny life turns out, my partner decided he wanted to do a TEFL course and teach English abroad. And at the time I thought, oh, yeah, okay, I'll go with you. So sometimes people can lead you into different paths educationally, or you fall into them by mistake. So we both did a TEFL course, a teaching English as a foreign language course, and we went to live in Italy for a year. And that's where I discovered, but by accident, that I really liked teaching English to speakers of other languages. And he decided he didn't as much, ironically. So he went on to do something else, and I went on to carry on in teaching. After that, I worked in private language schools, teaching English and drama, on summer schools. And then I got a job. At one point, I had 3 different jobs. So I was driving to Trafford College in the morning and teaching English, and then jumping in the car and driving to Manchester Adult Education Service in the afternoon. And I had 3 different employers because I hadn't got a full-time job. And then I got offered a full-time teaching job at the Manchester College, which is huge. It's one of the biggest FE colleges in Europe now. And I was there for 10 years. And I started off teaching international students English. I then moved into ESOL. And then, funnily enough, I ended up teaching on the TESOL course that I actually did myself, which was interesting. And then I was moved into teacher education, and they asked me to do a master's. This was at the Manchester College, and I did my master's completely online. Wow. Quite a long time ago now, and that was quite a new experience for me. And although it fitted in really well with me because I had a family at the time and I was working full time, and it was tough, it was definitely tough. And it fitted in time wise. I still miss the interaction with people, I think.
Yes.
So I think probably it's a choice. I would probably like a blended approach, which is more available now, but it wasn't at the time then. So
it's interesting you talk about that online, because of course we've all had to move online, haven't we, with COVID? Yes. So we've all had that experience, and it is, isn't it? It's very remote. It's really hard. You do need those conversations with people, the water cooler conversations where you can bounce ideas off each other and just kind of you feed off each other, don't you?
You do. And I think it depends what kind of learner you are as well. And I'm very much a people person. I like to have study buddies. I like to have group discussions. I like to check in with other members. So I'm definitely not a solo studier. And I think everybody's different, as you know, and everybody has different needs and wants. But that's definitely, I think, one of mine. And I think it's why I enjoy being an educator, actually, because I like interacting with people.
And seeing how different people learn for their needs. Yeah, that's really important, isn't it?
It is.
Looking back for going through high school, you sort of skipped over high school. I don't think you really enjoyed it. Was it because you couldn't choose your own subjects? You couldn't sort of find your own pathway? I know when you said you moved on to college, you were happier because that was your choice.
Yeah, I was studying the things I wanted. And I think possibly looking back at high school, if you asked any of my teachers now and said, oh my goodness, Sarah Hasnip as I was then, they'd never have had me down as a teacher trainer. Isn't it funny how they'd never have had me down as a teacher? Because I think as a young learner, I was quite a challenge, Lyndsey, I think. Very chatty, as you can imagine. A bit of a distractor, quite dramatic. And I struggled with certain subjects, I think, things like maths, which is still, so I get it now with adult learners when they come to university and perhaps they haven't got their maths GCSE yet or something. So I understand that. I get that. It's a difficult process for some people. But but I think College of Further Education worked a lot better for me. I think possibly because I was treated more as a young adult, whereas and I was interacting with lots of different people, because from the age of when I started school 5 to when I left at 16, I'd been in a single sex school. And I think I needed to explore the world a bit more, I think. Yeah.
Do you think those experiences have shaped how you are as an educator?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely, definitely. And I think going to Weston-super-Mare Technical College and interacting with lots of different people from different courses as well. I absolutely loved it. I remember we did a production of Cabaret. It was marvellous, but we didn't have enough men, Lyndsey. So we had to borrow some boys from the catering department who ended up working as extras. But that's what I mean. I interacted with lots of different people from different subjects. And I absolutely love the freedom and the choice. And I think that worked better for me. So I will always be a lifelong advocate of the further education sector because it works so well for me, I think. Yeah.
We seem to bundle people together, don't we? And you have to learn this way. And everybody's so different. I'm really visual how I learn. And I am a talker. I need to talk things through. It's how it gets embedded in my brain. But I don't think sometimes school gives you that freedom, does it?
No, I think it is very much a conveyor belt system. You will all go through at the same time. You will all take the exam at the same time. You will take these core subjects. That's why I think at least GCSE options now are so important for people to choose what they want. And I think I was very lucky, actually, Lyndsey, because my parents were very supportive when I said I wanted to do drama. Whereas not everybody's parents, they might have seen that as certain creative subjects in the arts are viewed by some individuals as soft subjects, which is absolutely not true. It's just, there's different ways of assessing learning, aren't there? And there's lots of, I'm a big advocate now at the university of finding alternative ways of assessment, from writing an academic essay sitting in an exam room, from people producing things. At the TIRI conference, actually, next week, I'm going to talk about the use of storyboards as a form of assessment and as a pedagogic tool. I think there's all sorts of things on the new PGCE courses that we're developing. We're going to use vlogs, video logs. We do team teachers. We get them to make posters and talk about them. We get them to do a little mini Viva. So I think, going back to what you're saying, I think there's more opportunity now for people to meet assessment criteria in different ways, from perhaps sitting down and writing an essay.
Absolutely. And I think we briefly touched on this when I was talking to you before we started the interview. I think when I first came to university, my impression was my education was going to be like high school. And even though I wanted to be here and I wanted to learn, when I was sat there just being overawed by everybody, I really did think it's going to be like high school if I won't be able to do it. And it couldn't be further from the truth. When you come to Bolton, which I think is different anyway, and in further education, it's very collaborative, isn't it? It's very different.
It definitely is in teacher education and the courses that I'm on, because we ask courses I run, because we ask people to do collaborative team projects. We ask them to team teach together. We ask them to present in groups, so that and you watch each other doing little micro teaches. So it's very much learning from each other. And also the university experience isn't just your course. It's like I was saying about all the things, the jobs I did in between acting, it's all the people you meet in between, the things that you fall into by accident. I always say to the trainees, go and try teaching here for a day, go and watch this, because sometimes people, like I did with the Telfer course, fall into things by accident. Yeah. So the more things you see and you try out, the better it is. Even if you think, okay, I don't like that, and you tick it off and say, I wouldn't do that. I think it all adds to your understanding. And I think all the clubs and societies are so important, so that you get involved socially and you learn from that as well, because research shows as well that children that go to, after school clubs, sports clubs, computers, brownies guides, scouts, all of that kind of thing, it actually develops their language and their literacy skills more, and their what we call cultural and social capital. Your understanding of different cultures, of different societies. Yeah. Well, my son used to play rugby. Very middle class thing there, Lyndsey, playing rugby. He used to go and meet school.
Was it rugby union? I'm laughing at the league.
Sorry?
League or union?
Oh, gosh, now you're asking the wrong person. It was just like an after school. It was a local club that he just decided he wanted to go to. So which will that be? I don't know. I'm embarrassed now. But he met loads of kids from different schools.
Yes, of course.
From loads of different backgrounds. And that was really good for him.
Yeah.
And his understanding of different people, really. So yeah.
I live in a place which is unfortunately very white middle class. So for my son, that's all he sees. Whereas we go to different clubs, and we come to one in Bolton, actually, it's a wrestling club, and he sees so many different people, and it's brilliant for him. It's so important not to keep them in one place, isn't it?
I think it is. And that's the same with students. And that's why it's important to have all these different societies and clubs. So for my daughter, when my daughter went to university, I think she struggled a bit socially at first. And the actual clubs and societies saved her, I think, at university, because she met a whole load of people who she would not have met. Yeah. And she might have been, and it gave her a new society and group to talk about. And she actually ended up organising some of the clubs and running them and becoming the equality and diversity officer. So that's what I mean. It builds other skills.
Yeah. Now, I think we've skipped massively forward here. We need to hop back, don't we? So you mentioned you were an actress. Do I know you in anything? Will I have seen you?
I think, well, not unless you went to Oldham Coliseum. I worked at Oldham Coliseum. I worked at the Manchester Forum. in Wythenshawe. I've been to all the glamorous places. I did little bits of television. I think my mum and dad were most proud when I appeared on Coronation Street, and I had 3 lines in that. So
what did you do?
What did I do? I was a receptionist on the desk when Kevin Webster, I don't know whether he's still in it, Kevin Webster, came to, I think he'd given his driving licence to one of the twins, and they'd used it under a false name, and I can't remember what it was about now, but it was all very exciting at the time. And yeah, it's yes, a claim to fame. Yes, yeah.
So thinking you did your undergraduate degree, and then you've done your master's a few years later online. How was that different? Not just focusing on the online.
Okay, so my degree was in drama, so it was very, very practical. It was quite forward-thinking, Bretton Hall. So rather than writing about Elizabethan theatre, we performed it and did it. And they did a lot of peer collaboration where you directed other people and plays, they directed you. So a third-year student directed you in your first-year production. So my degree was very, very practical. Mm. So when I came back to doing my academic writing again, it'd been quite a long time since A-levels, so I had to practice again, I think, for my master's. And I got into it, and I did it again. So I would say that was the difference, really.
It's kind of like comparing apples and oranges, really, with your courses, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. But no, I did. I got into doing my master's online. I completed that. I carried on in teacher education. And then again, this was sort of by accident. I had a colleague at the Manchester College who said, I've seen a job for you. And she said, you should go for it at Bolton University. And she kind of, bless her, coerced me into it. And I thought, I'll just go along and to keep her quiet and see how I got on. And I think probably because I was relaxed and just enjoying the day, I got the job. And that was in 2009. Wow. So, yeah. So that was when I first started at the University of Bolton teaching on the teacher education courses.
Wow. So where do you see your next career path going? How do you see yourself developing?
Well, I'd like to, my area after, I've done my doctorate in education with the University of Bolton. Oh, and that, yeah, so that's something I am really proud of, actually, because, we talked earlier, I don't know whether we recorded a bit about imposter syndrome.
Yes.
And I thought, hang on a minute, I thought that this has happened by accident. Here's a girl that was, fairly badly behaved at school, not particularly academic, and she signed herself up for a doctorate in education. What? How did that happen? So the way I did it, I just thought about it as a long essay, Lyndsey. So I thought about, okay, I'm just going to write this long essay that's going to end up with the doctorate so that it didn't frighten me too much. And I decided to focus on the area of storytelling as a pedagogic tool. So that linked in with my drama. So it's how you can use stories in education to teach people things. And I decided to involve my trainees with part of my research so that I didn't have too many extra things to do outside of my job. So what I did was I asked all of my ESOL trainee teachers to use a story in their lesson for an hour, and they could choose whatever they wanted to do. I didn't tell them. And they came up with all these amazing things. They used storyboards, they used podcasts, they used videos. And then I got reflections of how they felt it had gone on Moodle. I observed them teaching. And I also asked the ESOL students, and that fed into my doctorate masterpiece, if you like.
What did you find?
Well, yeah, the interesting thing that I found, and funnily enough, because we're telling stories now, is that the great use of anecdotal stories.
Yes.
As a pedagogic tool. So what I found was that when you tell someone a personal anecdotal story, they will very often tell you one back. And I suppose as a teacher trainer, I'm a little bit of a maverick here, because when I was training, they always said, don't tell learners anything about yourself, boundaries. And I agree with that up to a point, but actually I'm always telling my trainees to tell you lots of things about myself, little stories about me, Sarah Telfer, about my family, about my life. but more importantly about my teaching career, mistakes that I've made. So very often I'll give them an example and say, this is what I did wrong. And they'll remember that not to do it, and it makes them laugh. And then very often they'll share their experiences with me. So I found that the use of stories is very good as warmers. It helps you to get to know your students. But also, if you tell them a little bit about yourself, it makes you seem more human as an educator. So I think trainees are more likely to approach you to discuss things, and also encourages them to feed in their personal experiences into their educational practice.
This is just really amazing, because this is really why I'm doing these podcasts without knowing any of this. It made sense to me to try and get to know our academics, because I feel by hearing a bit more about you, I can be more relatable towards you, approach you more, or come and ask questions. So that's so interesting. That
it helps you to understand people more, I think. And it's amazing how you can be with colleagues and people but not really know much about them to understand them. And this is an anecdotal story, this is true. Chris Spencer, who I work with, and I thought, I know Chris quite well, but we ended up going on a train journey together. We were going to do some kind of project, and I talked to Chris for an hour on that train journey, more than I ever had, because you don't have time as academics to sit down and talk. And by the end of that train journey, there were things about Chris that I'd never known before that were really interesting. And I think, that's how you know about, or that's where, and it builds connections between people. So I think that time spent in class, letting your learners talk to each other, talking and spending the time getting to know your learners, actually is part of the preparation, the foundation for teaching, if that makes sense.
No, it really does. It seems to just make natural sense to me, to that. I really do feel that. I can't put into words why I feel that. It just seems to make sense. It's amazing to hear that that's what your research is.
Yeah, and on the PGCE I use stories quite a bit, because I ask trainees at the end to tell the story of their journey during the PGCE in forms of reflection. So sometimes I get them to do a storyboard or even a diagram which they talk through as part of their professional, reflections, where they came in, all the different things that have happened to them over a year, because it's quite an intensive year doing a PGCE, and then where they think they are at the end. And each person's story is different, and a lot of people go on and go into teachers, which is, to be professional teachers, but some don't actually. Some go into education related jobs. Okay. So they might go on to be a researcher. Yeah. Or they might go on to be like a school liaison officer. But I think it's quite important to think about where you came in, all the things that have happened to you, where you are when you finish, and perhaps where you'd like to go in the future. And that's a story, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is.
Every learner has a story. There you go. There's your soundbite. Every learner has a story, because they do.
Would this be the same for children in high schools? Would you say that's how they should be educated?
Using stories? Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. That for them to talk about their experiences, because that's really important. It's part of building good oral skills and good oral personal and social skills. That's why I suppose in private schools they have a lot of debating societies, which are actually very good, because it teaches, it educates people on how to discuss things and disagree. And I've always said, I said in the PGCE class, I'm very happy for you to disagree with me. I'm very happy for you to disagree with theories, but you need to support it and say why, and then possibly suggest an alternative. But part of debating things, examining things, is building the skills for critical analysis, isn't it, later at university, where you have to compare different theorists' views and then overlay that with your own opinion. So absolutely, I think it begins in high school. Storytelling is actually on the early years curriculum. Okay, so it's very important for the children to listen to stories. They don't always have to be active. It can be a passive activity, listening to stories, telling stories. And then actually stories are quite important when you get to GCSE, because on one of the GCSE papers, I believe there's creative writing where you have to write a story. And obviously it's really important to build those storytelling skills and narrative skills. And you need English language GCSE. Doesn't matter what you're going to study in order to progress on to other courses and further education.
Yes, of course. I keep thinking about my son as you're talking about debating, and I wonder if he could accept being wrong. That's something that he just really struggles with. He really struggles with being told that he's wrong sometimes. I don't know if that's done enough in schools. I'm thinking about my own school experience, because I know when I came to university, I had to learn how to be a critical thinker and
Yes.
Understand what that meant. I think I was very sort of one track, and I was in the police for a long time, and it really amazes me now, reflecting back, thinking I really didn't critically analyze all my sort of decisions, really. And I don't know if you're supposed to do that with every decision you make, but I think it should be a skill that you use a lot.
I think it's difficult, and I think it's I go and observe in my Terry professor role. I go and observe around the university on Zoom and live classrooms. And the thing I've noticed with first year undergraduates is that they are quite passive, and that they're very ready to take notes, listen, but actually interacting, debating and questioning things are skills they don't have or haven't developed yet, and which need developing. So they're quite willing to sit back, listen, as I've said, note take. But when it comes to discussing, interacting, I don't know, for example, I watched a law lesson, and what he was trying to get them to do was to question the law. You know, this is the law. What do you think about it? Do you think it's right? Do you think it's wrong? If so, why? Tell me why. Give me a reason. And then which law do you think, how would you adjust that law to make it, work better? So I think those are skills which people, like you say, don't always come in with and need to be built.
Yeah, absolutely. I could sit and debate for hours. Now, honestly,
Yes.
Has that changed with being online? And again, I'm thinking, when I used to sit in the Dean Lecture Theatre, very, very rarely would I put my hand up and say anything. And I think I was probably intimidated by the amount of people. Whereas when we went online, I felt it was just me and that lecturer. Even though I knew there was other people in the room, I would ask questions more. I felt more able to sort of put my hand up and say something.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it, that transition to online learning, and it's a different learning experience, learning live and learning online. I mean, and I tell you what is quite good in the lecture theatre, and I know they do this at Huddersfield. There's a text. So you can text you can text questions on your phone, which come up on the back of the screen behind the lecturer, which is quite nice, so that they're anonymous, but you can ask a question without feeling silly. Does that make sense? And he'll look at the questions and he'll answer. And I think that's the beauty of it being online, because you can put questions in the chat box, you can ask, and yes. And as you said, maybe that works better for you. And it's interesting, perhaps some of the online experiences have worked better for some people.
Yeah, I think what you said earlier about a blended learning approach, I really like that idea. I like the idea of having the opportunity to go into university and maybe smaller groups and talk, and thrash around ideas and talk about your assignments and have workshop lessons. But then perhaps there's really front-facing theory that you need to sort of churn through. I really do benefit from being online, I think.
There are benefits. My son is studying law at Leeds, and he has recorded lecture. Yes, I know. But you can't escape from Leeds University. But he quite likes the fact that he can watch recorded observations, recorded lectures, and then play them back. So that if he's not quite got it, he thinks, I can just play it back and have a look at it. Whereas you can't do that in the university, can you? You can't pause the lecturer when they're doing a live lecture and go back. So I think there's pros and cons to each one. And I think, again, it will depend on the kind of learner that you are.
Yeah. I know we're going a bit off topic, but it's really interesting to think, how are we going to move forward from this? How are we going to move into the next stage of educating? Because we're going to have to, I guess, make a choice. Are we doing online or not? Or is it going to perhaps be in the Dean Lecture Theatre presenting to people who want to be there, but also recording it for people who want to watch from home or can record it. And it's going to be really interesting to see how it progresses.
It is. I think we can't unlearn what we had to learn very, very quickly in the space of a year. So there's lots of good things, as I've said, that come out of it. We've learned how to teach online. We've learned how to learn online. So I think possibly a blended approach moving forward might be the way to go. Yeah. So I think we need to reconfigure our ideas, really.
Has moving online changed your practices, how you teach educators?
Yes, because as a teacher educator, I have to model best practice. So I had to learn very quickly how to teach online, how to use Zoom, how to use Teams. And again, funny enough, telling stories, they probably learned from watching some of the mistakes I made initially, which I hold my hand up at the beginning. And they think, all right, I won't do that. Or so they learn by observing and watching you do it. So, I share my screen, I show videos, and then I ask them to do the same. So I think they follow your practice as well. Perhaps your use of breakout rooms, all the things that you do online, they then go on and use in their own teaching practice. But it definitely accelerated my digital literacy skills, my confidence in that area. I think I've built quite a lot up in there.
We keep moving off topics, don't we? So it needs to go back to your education. So thinking about you doing your doctorate, how did it go for you? How was it?
It was all right. I think it was hard work doing a doctorate whilst working full time. I had two supervisors who were marvellous, I've got to say. They were my colleagues, and they did give me, you'll be familiar with this term, unconditional positive regard. So when I was probably being difficult or having little mini meltdowns about various points, they were incredibly patient and supportive, and offered me very warm feedback. Because as you said, you can have imposter syndrome, you can doubt yourself. But I kept going back to that thing, I'm just writing a long essay over 5 years. That's how that kind of took the fear away for me. And I truly believe now that there are many of my PGC students who can move on to doing a doctorate. No reason why not.
Absolutely. Another reason why I want to do these podcasts is to show that anybody can come into education, no matter what your age is, and that it's achievable for anyone. It does take hard work, of course. It's further education, but it is accessible for anybody, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely is. And I actually think that's something Bolton is very good at.
Yes.
Is supporting adults.
Chances.
They give people chances. They're incredibly inclusive. We're adapting, as I've said, with different assessment techniques so that people can meet the learning objectives and module criteria in different ways. And we absolutely champion people who are returning to education, and people who, haven't been, in formal education for a long time, people who've had families who are returning, people who've changed careers, all sorts of people with quite complex, I would say, special educational needs and differences who've gone on to make fantastic teachers, and fantastic educators. So, yeah, it's great. We had a mentor and assessor evening, award evening last night, and it was lovely to see that some of the people who are acting as mentors now are our former PGCE trainees.
Oh, amazing.
It is. It really is. So what they learned from their mentors, they're now passing on to other people, so they're passing on their stories, if you like.
Yeah. It all comes back to stories, doesn't it?
I always say this with learners. I always say there's a story behind every learner.
Oh, there is.
And you just need to find out what it is. Some people will tell you their story immediately if they're Sarah Telfer types, and other people or Lyndsey types, and other people take time and may not give you their whole story. But to understand somebody, you need to know as much about them as you possibly can, I think, to understand them.
Are some people quite suspicious of you when you're asking them to sort of portray, to tell a story? Do they sort of not really want to tell you about themselves?
Some people don't, to start off with, but I think it's that's a way of building trust with people. Sometimes they just listen to your story and digest that. But what I did find is that mostly people will give you one back. Yeah. Eventually, they'll tell you something. And it may not be to me as a tutor, it may be to their peers.
Oh, of course, yeah.
For example, they might talk about their different experiences within teaching practice. And I think the PGC is such an intense course that you really need the support of your peers. And you really need to share those stories and say, oh, golly, I went to teaching practice today and this happened. And, and we absolutely in our PGCE sessions champion the disasters, the things that haven't gone well, that you have to laugh over or think, right, OK, how are we going to get over this and move forward? Because that's life. And that's still, even now, I think sharing experiences with my colleagues is one of the most important things.
Yes.
Sharing your teaching experiences in the classroom, especially when we were all learning on Zoom.
Yes.
I actually practiced with my colleague Steve Slayan. So he was at home sharing videos. Can you hear me? Can you see me? If I do this. In fact, I did it last night for the Mentor and Assess Awards, because we'd put on, for every award, there was a little sound clip of applause. And I wasn't sure if anyone could hear it or not. So I was testing it out on Amanda. So you need your colleagues. Yes.
Yeah, you do. You do. This is somewhere or an area I'm struggling in with doing a PhD. We have a massive community at Bolton. There's over 300 people doing a PhD, but not much interaction between us. And that's something we're really trying to push as a society, because it's like you just said, it's the support. It's the conversations. It's the being able to ask somebody who's perhaps a few years ahead of you to mentor you, or to what do I do here? I'm very new into it. I only started in September, and of course I haven't been on campus to do my PhD. So it's really hard to know, am I doing right? Am I researching enough? What should I be up to? What's the stage?
Yeah, it's spending that time, as I said before, sharing the story. So even if you meet once every 2 weeks, and that's the beauty of Zoom, you can all meet on Zoom with a cup of tea and share and say, what did you do here? Or what would you do here? And it's giving each other ideas, but very often moral support, I think, and an encouragement that's really important. Because when you do a doctorate or a PhD, it can be quite a lonely process, because you're supposed to be, again, I'm a maverick on here, you're supposed to be an independent researcher, able to get on with things with yourself. Yes, but you also need to talk about your critical thinking with other people. Part of critical thinking is discussion and debate. And I don't think it's possible without other people. I think interaction is critical for part of your doctoral studies. Not just talking things through with your supervisor, but with other PhD students as well.
Yeah. You learn so many different stories, don't you, about how to gather data, or how to, I don't know, for example, I was talking to a girl the other day who started telling me about her PhD. It was trauma, and that links to mine. So to have that mutual conversation about trauma theory was
trauma
really
buddy. Yes, a trauma buddy for your PhD.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do you see yourself going then? Where's your research going to progress to?
Well, I'm hoping I've got a chapter published that's going to be published in a book. I'm doing some research, funnily enough, with Danielle Ellis, who's in nursing, who uses storyboards as a form of assessment. So we're hoping to do some research on the use of storyboards in nursing education. So stories can be used in any subject. I'm still learning about researching and going back to imposter syndrome. That I think is something which I'm working on myself when it comes to publishing articles and having the confidence to move forward and doing that. So I'm being beautifully supported by Professor Paul Hollins at the moment, who I'm doing some research with, and Professor Di Griffiths, who used to work with us. And beautifully, I learned so much from Dan Edmondson, who's as you know, another of our PhD students who has a lot more quantitative data research knowledge than myself actually at some point. So again, I'm very willing to learn from everybody, and I particularly enjoy doing what might be referred to as the donkey work of the research, collecting data, doing focus groups. I like talking to people. I like linking people up. I like organising events so that people can share and discuss ideas. So I think that's where I hope to see myself going, and staying within the area of using storytelling as a pedagogic tool.
Amazing. It's been really lovely talking to you. I'm going to press stop on the machine. Just give me 1 second. Thank you very much for your time.
It's been a pleasure. Okay.